Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to Lyoko Retrospectives. And today we're going to be discussing episode 90 of Lyoko, Wrong Exposure. And based on the thumbnail for this episode, I kind of thought it was going to go in a different direction, but what we got here, it's just kind of filler, kind of character stuff, just filler and character stuff. Pretty much, Jeremy and Aelita go back to the heritage estate because with everything going on with Xana, Jeremy decides that he doesn't want to leave any stone unturned, so he wants to go back to the Hermitage Estate and see if there's anything they missed, because apparently they did go through there and search every nook and cranny for anything that might be useful. As such, in their search, Aelita finds an old picture of herself and her father back when he still worked at Caddick, and so when she shows it to Jeremy, and it is kind of nice because it's clearly a happy moment. We see Aelita just beaming, and even Jeremy kind of smiles at that. But what ultimately is of interest to Jeremy is that there's an equation in the photo behind Franz and Aelita, because I think they were in a classroom and it was written on a blackboard. As such, they take the photo back with them to Caddick, and Jeremy has it enlarged and copies down the formula. And sure enough, it is a program for the supercomputer. But it's nothing really too major. It's a program that's supposed to reboot the supercomputer, which they admit might not be that great, but it's useful to have. However, after Jeremy finishes up the program, Odd comes in because Jeremy was doing it in his room, and Odd says he wants to borrow the computer so he can email a picture of himself to a girl he's trying to woo. Of course, Jeremy lets him do it, but he tells him to not touch anything else and to be careful. But ultimately, it's Odd, and so when he gets everything ready and he sends what he thinks is a photo of himself, he instead ends up sending a picture of Aelita and Franz Hopper to Sissy, who immediately shows it to her dad. Now, the principal does recognize Franz Hopper since he worked at the school. However, he's a little confused as to why Aelita's in the picture since she's supposed to be Odd's cousin. And as such, he calls the group in, and Odd does come clean with what he did, and the group is, of course, giving him the stink eye, but it's Odd, so you know he's not doing it out of malice, and his actions in the episode, I think, make up for it. And so, as such, the principal does question them, and while they try putting up a defense and they play dumb, even Jeremy pointing out that the picture predated when Aelita would have typically been that age, because, well, she looks like 10 or 12 in this one, that was, like, taken about a decade ago. So since they don't know about the supercomputer, that means that essentially without the supercomputer she would have been in her 20s. So I think that will work. At the same time, the principal still thinks something's up, so he has them confined to the library while he double checks each of her references, which is something you think he would have done anyway, but whatever. However, of course, that's when Xana once again launches an attack as he possesses the principal again, and he goes to the library and takes Aelita, and just as you do, he knocks her out first chance he gets and brings her to the factory to send her into Lyoko. The group ends up catching wind of this because of the super scan, and they manage to overpower Jim and escape. And as such, they manage to get to the factory with Jeremy, Ulrich, and Yumi going to the computer terminal, and Odd staying behind to deal with Principal Delmas. However, when they get to Lyoko, it turns out Xana's employing a new strategy to get Franz out. In this case, he's going back to what he did in season 3, as he sends the Schizozoa in and has it capture Aelita and allow it to possess her. And through the Schizozoa, Xana managed to possess Aelita. And so from there, it kind of becomes a catch-22, as the group realize because through Aelita, Xana is going to try and get her to just walk into the digital sea, which essentially would be a very big no-no, because if she fell in, one of two things would happen: either Franz would save her and would let himself be exposed, thus allowing Xana to just start shooting at him, or as we saw with William, it'll allow Xana to pretty much take Aelita completely and pretty much be in the same boat as William. And considering the amount of admin access she has, that would be a very bad thing, especially since she's the only one that can deactivate towers. So, very bad thing at all. So, they think they need to devirtualize her, but unfortunately, Odd's kind of at the end of his rope while fighting the principal, so At the same time, they need her to stay in Lyoko so she can deactivate the tower. So yeah, they're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. Thankfully, Jeremy actually does manage to employ the program to reboot the supercomputer, and that does ultimately I kind of like how it's represented in Lyoko, because considering that it's a reboot, you think that would just mean turning the supercomputer off and on, which, as we saw before, with the supercomputer it gets turned off, it would cause Lyoko to dematerialize. In this case, though, it just causes a giant wave to send out that freezes everything in Lyoko, and then sends out another wave to unfreeze them. And it's clear that the process does take a lot out of you, because every single thing in Lyoko, the warriors and even one of the monsters they were facing, ends up just kind of collapsing afterwards. But the shock is enough to free Aelita, and so from there they rush her to the tower, manage to deactivate it just in the nick of time, and they do a return to the past so that Sissy doesn't get the photo. And of course, the group does wonder if there's anything that could lead the principal back to Franz Hopper, and likewise Aelita. And Aelita says it's fine. It's fine. There's no record of an Aelita Hopper that went to Caddick because she was homeschooled, and even then, her last name is actually not Hopper. It's Schaefer, which because in this episode we learn that apparently their family's name was Schaefer, but after the death of her mother and they moved to the Hermitage estate, her dad wanted to get a fresh start, and so he changed his name to Hopper, which is her mother's maiden name. Yeah, either way the group decides there's no big deal, but Aelita does still keep the picture because it's still a memory of happier times. So again, it's all right. Nothing. I said the episode was kind of filler and character stuff. At best, the character stuff we have is seeing more of Aelita and her memories with her father, especially when she finds the photo. And I'll give credit where it's due. That's just the nice mushy stuff that I really do like. Especially when we see Aelita still caring about it, and even we have a little moment between her and Jeremy, as before Jeremy goes to analytical mode when he sees the computer program written out on the blackboard behind Aelita and Franz in the photo, he does actually take a moment and say, you look happy in this, which again, I genuinely like, because you gotta remember, this was her life once upon a time, and even while she was searching through the Hermitage estate, she does have brief flashbacks to when she used to live there, so I do like that. It's clear that she's not letting them rule her. She has managed to move past that part of her life, but at the same time, it still was a major part of her life, and it's still kind of cute to see. Although it does make me want, when Jeremy did mention how apparently she should be in her 20s, that means that Aelita is technically overage. So if it wasn't for Lyoko, Jeremy would not be it would be very taboo for Jeremy to date her. But again, that's kind of the extent of the character stuff. Again, at best, the more we learn about her in the episode is that her last name is actually Schaefer and not Hopper. Other than that, though, nothing really much comes of it. It's just a brief conflict to get the episode rolling, and like with most of the B plots in Lyoko, it gets derailed the instant Xana attacks, because the group has to focus their attentions on that, and because they have access to the return to the past function, it's undone before it can cause any major impact. So yeah, again, like with most filler episodes, like with most plots and like with most stuff in Lyoko, it doesn't really have a lasting impact beyond its initial episode. So yeah, that's slightly disappointing, but again, for the most part, the episode's still fine. We still get some nice cute stuff with seeing more of Aelita and her past, and again, the plot itself is actually rather smart. In this case, instead of just sending Aelita to Lyoko and then hoping for the best, Xana actually had the Schizozoa go in and allowed him to, and through the Schizozoa, Xana possessed Aelita, and is just going to pilot her right into the digital sea, which I think makes sense. I kind of like that. I kind of thought for a second that maybe Xana was going to try and go back, do what he did in season 3 and have Aelita destroy Lyoko bit by bit, but honestly, I think even Xana knows that plan doesn't work at this point, because as we've seen, Jeremy can recreate Lyoko at any time he wants, so yeah, moot point. But again, I think that's still a good thing, because whether they lure out Franz Hopper or not, that'd be taking Aelita off the book. That would be a major blow to the group and to Franz Hopper. So again, smart plan. We didn't even see William this episode, and actually that also. And speaking of which, there was actually this one cool scene in the episode when their initial plan Jeremy told Ulrich to devirtualize Aelita because that would undo the possession. But when they do but when he tries doing it, he managed to pull out one of his swords and tries to slash her, but she manages to catch it, and she uses it for herself, which leads to an actually really cool duel between her and Ulrich, which I think is really nice, because even the thing is, Aelita, we don't see Aelita fight a lot. She has abilities, but at best she's a glass cannon. She has her attack is powerful, but she doesn't really know how to fight and defend herself in battle. So seeing her actually kind of kicking ass and doing moves is actually really cool. Especially, even though, I know she's possessed, but at the same time, again, it's sort of cool. Is this falling down? Sorry, it looked like the camera was panning down. But so, I thought that was a cool scene. Otherwise, though, the episode itself is just fine. Standard filler stuff. Nothing amazing, nothing spectacular. Just there, has a plot. Interesting idea. Actually pretty interesting. Actually rather smart plot from the villain. And at best, the most we learned here in this episode is Aelita's last name. So, yeah, there's really nothing else to say for this episode. I wish there was, but I can't think of anything else. So, yeah, I guess the other development is that Jeremy can now reboot the supercomputer. So, that's neat. But otherwise, yeah, nothing really new, and otherwise just a fine episode. Nothing great, nothing to time there, just standard filler as usual. So, yeah, that's about it. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and I'll see you next week. Take care.